At 62 years old, Seal remains one of the most recognizable voices on the planet. His unmistakable sound, his poetic lyrics, and his iconic hits like "Kiss from a Rose" helped define an entire era of music. But behind the voice that mesmerized millions lies a story the public rarely hears, a story marked by pain, loss, health struggles, betrayal, and a lifelong battle to protect the gentle spirit behind the superstar. Seal's life has never been simple. From the deep emotional scars of his upbringing, to a mysterious illness that forever changed his appearance, to the battles he's faced in relationships, fame, and family, Seal has endured more than most could bear. And while he's always carried himself with grace, strength, and humility, those closest to him know the truth. Seal's journey has been heartbreaking, and much of that heartbreak has followed him into his early 60s. Today, the world still sees the calm, soft-spoken artist with a soulful voice, but behind that calm is a man who has survived trauma after trauma, fought through physical pain, and navigated the challenges of fatherhood, divorce, and public scrutiny. As Seal turns 62, fans are only now learning the full extent of the struggles he's kept hidden for decades. This is the tragic story of Seal. A story of resilience. A story of wounds, some physical, some emotional, and some that still haven't fully healed. And once you see everything he's been through, you'll understand why fans say his life is far more heartbreaking than anyone ever imagined. Seal's voice may have lifted him to global stardom, but the origins of that voice, the pain, the soul, the depth, can be traced back to one of the most troubled childhoods in modern music history. Long before awards, fame, or adoration, Seal was a child struggling to survive a world that seemed determined to break him. Born Henry Olusegun Adeola Samuel in London, Seal was separated from his mother at just a few years old. His parents' relationship was unstable, and Seal grew up in foster care for much of his early life. For many children, foster care can be a safe haven, but for Seal, it was the beginning of a long battle with abandonment, distrust, and emotional trauma. He has spoken openly about how those early years shaped him, describing a sense of loneliness so deep that even now, decades later, it still echoes in his music. When Seal returned to live with his biological parents, things didn't get easier. His father, a strict and often volatile man, believed harsh discipline was the only way to raise a strong son. Seal has recalled episodes of emotional and physical intimidation that left deep psychological wounds. It wasn't just fear, it was confusion. He loved his father, yet he was terrified of him. That complex emotional dynamic followed Seal into adulthood, influencing his relationships, his sense of self-worth, and even his music. The scars on Seal's face, which many people mistakenly believe came from his father or physical abuse, were actually the result of a rare and aggressive form of lupus he developed as a teenager. But even before the illness, Seal already felt marked, shaped by instability and a constant sense of not belonging. His childhood home was not a peaceful place. Instead, it was a battlefield of silence, tension, and survival. School offered little relief. Seal struggled to fit in, not only because of his complicated home life, but also because of his Nigerian and Brazilian heritage at a time when racism in the UK was overt and cruel. He was bullied, excluded, and made to feel different. And yet, even then, there were glimpses of the man he would become. Seal found solace in music, in melodies that allowed him to express what he could never say out loud. Music became his escape, his therapy, and ultimately his salvation. By his late teens, Seal had already lived through experiences that would break most adults. The lupus flare that left the permanent scars on his face was only one part of a larger story, a story of fear, trauma, and emotional damage that he carried into adulthood. Yet through it all, Seal survived. Not because life was kind to him, but because he found strength in the one thing no one could take away, his voice. This was the foundation of Seal's journey, a childhood filled with trauma, instability, and isolation. And as we move forward, you'll see how those early struggles followed him into fame, shaping both his greatest triumphs and his most heartbreaking tragedies. To the world, Seal's signature facial scars became part of his legendary image, striking, iconic, instantly recognizable. But behind those scars lies a medical battle that shaped nearly every chapter of his life. As a teenager, Seal was diagnosed with discoid lupus erythematosus, DLE, a rare autoimmune disease that attacks the skin. Unlike systemic lupus, which targets internal organs, DLE focuses on the skin, creating lesions, inflammation, and permanent scarring. But this clinical description barely scratches the surface of what Seal endured. At a time when most teenagers are discovering who they are, Seal was watching his own face change in ways he could not control. The lesions appeared suddenly, painfully, and aggressively. He was hospitalized, treated, and monitored, all while trying to hide his fear that he might not survive. Lupus doesn't just scar the body, it scars the mind. For Seal, those early years were filled with questions he didn't know how to answer. Why me? Will this get worse? Will anyone ever accept me? Doctors warned him that his condition could flare up at any time. He lived with the constant threat that the disease might spread or intensify. Even after the lesions healed, the scars remained, deep, visible, and lifelong. For many people, these scars would be a source of shame or insecurity. But Seal eventually turned them into a symbol of power. Yet before he could do that, he had to endure years of uncertainty and fear. The emotional toll was just as overwhelming. Seal was already battling feelings of abandonment and trauma from his early childhood. Adding a visible illness only magnified his internal struggles. Kids at school stared. Strangers whispered. Seal often described the experience as feeling like he was living behind a mask that he could never remove. But lupus didn't just affect his appearance, it affected his entire life's trajectory. His dreams of pursuing music were shaken by self-doubt. He wondered whether audiences would accept someone who looked so different. He worried his illness could return at any moment, threatening his voice, his energy, or even his life. And as he grew older, the disease followed him quietly into adulthood. Lupus is unpredictable, and even when inactive, it leaves behind fatigue, sensitivity, and painful reminders. There were periods during his rise to fame when Seal silently fought flare-ups, exhaustion, and emotional lows, all while performing for millions with a smile on his face. Then came another blow. Doctors informed him that lupus might affect his ability to handle stress, sunlight, and long touring schedules. For an artist whose career depended on constant travel and intense performances, this was devastating. It forced Seal to rethink how he lived, how he worked, and how he managed his health. Yet despite everything, Seal refused to allow lupus to define him. What makes his story even more heartbreaking is not just the illness itself, but how hard he had to fight, physically, emotionally, and psychologically, just to maintain the life he had built. Every performance was a victory. Every tour was a risk. Every year without a flare was a blessing he never took for granted. Seal transformed what could have ruined him into part of his identity, proof of survival, proof of resilience, proof of a man who refused to hide. But if lupus was his silent physical battle, what came next was even more devastating, a war fought in his relationships, his marriage, and his personal life, where heartbreak cut deeper than any scar. For many years, Seal's marriage to supermodel Heidi Klum appeared to be one of Hollywood's rare love stories that truly worked. They renewed their vows annually, spoke tenderly about one another in interviews, and presented themselves as a united, joyful family. To the outside world, they were perfect. But behind the scenes, Seal was struggling in ways he kept deeply private, and the collapse of this marriage would become one of the most painful chapters of his life. Seal had always longed for stability. After a childhood marked by instability, trauma, and emotional wounds that never fully healed, he believed he had finally found the family he had dreamed of. With Heidi, he embraced fatherhood wholeheartedly, not only with the children they had together but also with Heidi's daughter from a previous relationship, whom he adopted as his own. His family became the center of his world. But the pressures of fame, relentless schedules, and Seal's own inner battles began to wear down the foundation of their relationship. Seal was passionate, emotional, and deeply protective of the people he loved. But sometimes, that intensity, combined with his struggle to manage stress and lingering effects of trauma, made communication difficult. He later admitted that despite his love for his family, he often felt overwhelmed by the demands of fame, parenting, and his internal fears. Rumors began swirling long before the public ever knew. Friends noticed the tension. Insiders heard whispers. And then, in 2012, the announcement came: Heidi and Seal were separating. For most celebrities, divorce means a press release and a few awkward headlines. But for Seal, it meant the dismantling of the family he believed would save him from the loneliness he had felt his entire life. The public narrative quickly spun out of control. Tabloids painted Seal as volatile. Others suggested he had become too controlling or emotionally intense. Seal pushed back, insisting he never stopped loving his wife or his children. But the damage had been done, and what hurt him most was watching strangers dissect the most painful event of his life with no understanding of what truly happened. Seal later revealed that the real tragedy wasn't the ending itself, but the emotional aftermath. He struggled with feelings of loss, guilt, and internal conflict. The family he cared for so deeply was suddenly fractured. His routines changed. His home felt quieter. The joy he once experienced in simple everyday moments felt muted. The hardest part, he said, was protecting his children. Seal feared that his own past, the instability he suffered as a child, was repeating itself in a new form. And he was terrified of failing the people he loved most. Even as he and Heidi worked to remain friendly and cooperative for their children, Seal admitted privately that the emotional fallout haunted him for years. His music during this period became darker, more reflective, filled with themes of love lost and emotional struggle. Fans noticed the change, but few knew the depth of the heartbreak behind it. Seal's divorce didn't just end a marriage, it reopened wounds he thought he had healed. It reminded him of abandonment, loss, and the fragile nature of the happiness he had fought so hard to build. But even this wasn't the end of Seal's hardships. What came next was a quieter, more personal struggle, his fight to rebuild his identity, rediscover his purpose, and confront the emotional weight he had carried for decades. As Seal steps into his early 60s, many assume he's settled into a peaceful chapter of his life, a legendary artist enjoying the legacy he built. But the truth is far more complicated. Behind the calm voice and serene presence lies a man who continues to carry years of emotional weight, hidden battles, and private heartbreak. Seal has survived childhood trauma, illness, fame, and a broken marriage, but the scars, both visible and invisible, remain with him. One of Seal's greatest challenges in this stage of life has been learning how to live with the emotional echoes of his past. His early abandonment, the instability of his upbringing, and the harsh cruelty he endured as a young child shaped him deeply. While he rarely speaks about it publicly, those close to him say these early experiences created a lifelong fear of not being enough, a fear Seal battles even now. Turning 62 didn't erase the memories or the insecurities. If anything, time has made them more pronounced. His divorce also left a profound mark. Although Seal and Heidi Klum now maintain a respectful, cooperative relationship for their children, the emotional wounds of that chapter never fully closed. Seal has admitted that his greatest heartbreak is the moments he missed, the birthdays, the milestones, the family traditions that were forever changed. He cherishes his children deeply, but the reality of shared custody and separate lives has weighed heavily on him. Becoming an empty-nest parent has added another layer of loneliness to his later years, forcing him to confront the quiet spaces that used to be filled with laughter and routine. Even his career, a source of joy for decades, has brought its own challenges. The music industry has changed. The demand for touring has slowed. And Seal, a perfectionist by nature, has struggled with the fear of fading relevance. While fans still adore him, he knows time is moving quickly, his energy isn't what it once was, and the pressure to maintain his voice and performance quality has become more difficult. Lupus, while controlled, still leaves him with fatigue and sensitivity he must manage carefully. Some days, Seal feels strong, other days, he wrestles with the limitations his body quietly imposes. Then there's the emotional burden of his public image. The world knows Seal as calm, composed, spiritual, the man who turned his pain into poetry. But maintaining that image, especially as he grows older, has been exhausting. Seal has confessed that he often feels isolated because people expect him to be unshakable. They see the scars on his face and assume he must be incredibly strong. They don't see the nights he lies awake wrestling with memories, doubts, and fears he never fully shares. Yet, through all this heartbreak, Seal continues to push forward. He meditates. He writes music. He fights to stay connected with his children. He performs when he can, grateful for the fans who still fill theaters to hear his voice. Seal has also embraced a quieter, more reflective lifestyle, one focused on healing rather than hiding his pain. The tragedy of Seal at 62 is not just what he has suffered, but how silently he has suffered it. His life has been marked by beauty and brilliance, but also by loneliness, insecurity, and battles most people never knew he was fighting. And yet, the most powerful part of Seal's story is this: despite everything, he continues to rise. He continues to create. He continues to love. And he continues to survive, with grace, humility, and a strength deeper than any scar.